Welcome to Know This Live. I'm Zinkley Esamwa. Joining me today is Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger. The lawmaker from Illinois has been one of the most outspoken Republicans who has called out fellow members of his party for supporting the insurrection on January 6th and questioning the 2020 elections. He joins me now. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
So I want to start with Liz Cheney. She was replaced by Trump ally, Representative Elise Stefanik, as chair of the Republican conference because she was vocal in calling out the, quote, big lie, which is that the election was stolen from Trump. Is there a place in the Republican Party for lawmakers who stand for truth and go against former President Trump?
I hope so. I think that's what we're determining. I think there's no doubt that at the moment, I guess the Trump forces, if you want to call it that, this idea of covering up January 6th, of moving on, is winning. And, it's my goal, and I know it's Liz's goal, to not do that. We were both Republicans far before Donald Trump was. And so to give up on the party this easily is not something we're going to do. But, I think there has to be an awakening, both among Republicans and among Americans, just that, look, truth matters. You got to deal with truth. And for our party, we have to come to grips with what happened on January 6th and what led to it. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to move on, no matter how much some people may want to.
And I think it's worth noting that Representative Cheney voted in line with Trump more than U.S. Representative Stefanik, who is still in office. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it means that policy doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is loyalty to one man. And of course, that's Donald Trump. I mean, it's always interesting. There was an author, I wish I could remember who it was, that made the point that was clear, which is so many of my colleagues said, well, I don't like the way Donald Trump tweets or talks, but I like his policies. Okay. And then now with Liz, they're like, well, I like her policies. I just don't like the way she tweets and talks. The other thing to keep in mind is Liz Cheney wasn't the one out there constantly bringing up this idea of the big lie. The former president himself is. He's the one that dozens of times, including, probably every day in the last month, talking about a stolen election. When you're asked about it, you can't avoid it, and you have to respond truthfully. So it may not kill the Republican Party for 2022. I don't know. There's a lot of tailwinds at the back of Republicans to take the majority, but this is really damaging long term for the party, but most importantly, for the country.
And Cheney has said that she'd consider running for higher office if it means that Trump wouldn't go back to the Oval Office. I wonder if you've spoken to her about a run or if you'd consider joining her.
I haven't spoken to her. I certainly would consider being on any, movement or any team or any candidacy she chose because I really believe in her leadership. I've known her now since she's been in Congress. The first couple of years she was here, she could have been the most famous person really in that freshman class. And she kept to herself in terms of the media. She got to know her colleagues. And then she kind of came out as a national figure. She did the hard work. And that's the kind of person that we need to follow to take back the party. Now, the question is, will the party recognize that? And I think that's a question yet to be answered.
And I want to pivot to the January 6th insurrection. You voted to impeach for incitement of insurrection. What has it felt like for you personally, seeing so many of your colleagues dig their heels into supporting President Trump?
So it's massively disappointing. And, if you think about it, I've been involved or liked politics since I was a kid. And, the Republican Party attracted me to it because of its strong international commitment, the idea of smaller government for more opportunity for people. And I always thought that my colleagues that came out with red lines, things they would not cross, the defense of the Constitution. And to see so many really, there's a lot that have just stayed quiet, fine, whatever, but so many that have openly crossed these red lines into almost authoritarianism or disregarding what happened on January 6th despite living through it. It's been really disappointing. And I try to stay optimistic. I believe there are cycles in politics. I believe the Republican Party is going to be around for a long time, and it will correct. I just don't know how much damage is going to be done between now and that moment they wake up.
And as you're talking about the state of the Republican Party, I'm mindful that after the insurrection, you said Republicans had to have a big family meeting where you all come together and hash out differences. Did that family meeting conversation happen, and what is your assessment now?
It did, but the crazy family members ended up winning out. And I mean, I think when we had the discussion about Liz the first time, it was obvious that there was support for her. But I think when Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise basically went and kissed the ring of Donald Trump, they resurrected him. They took somebody that was politically a has-been and made him the de facto leader of the Republican Party. So this is one of those moments, when you watch Intervention, for instance, and they try to have an intervention and it doesn't go well. That's what it feels like. And so maybe the Republican Party needs to hit rock bottom some more. But the fact is, there needs to be a wake up because this just isn't working for democracy, much less just the party.
Why are so many of your colleagues against a commission looking into what happened on January 6th?
Well, I think people like Kevin McCarthy are afraid that he's going to get called to testify. And he obviously knows things. He had conversations with the president on the day of the insurrection. He knew his mindset. There's a lot of people that are trying to pretend like maybe the president did make the order to defend the Capitol, or maybe he didn't know what was going on. And Kevin would have to respond truthfully. And then I think a lot of people are just simply doing what the former president wants. He says it's bad, then they're going to go with that because it's much easier to just go with what the former president wants and actually take a stand and explain that to your constituents. So I hope we can, get something implemented and going soon, and regardless of a vote, but actually have answers in the next year or so that the American people can evaluate on that basis.
And you've talked about moving the Republican Party into the future, but I wonder, how do you do that? And what does that look like when you have Republicans like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has made headlines for her support of far-right conspiracy theories, yet is being elected to Republican seats?
Well, it's part of the reason I started the whole Country First movement. It's country1st.com, which is just to say to fellow Republicans that feel homeless, look, here's an opportunity to come in and put country before the party, to be what it is that this party stands for. Now, look, there's no doubt we are outnumbered at this moment. You can see that in polling. You can see that in any number of key factors. But I do think that the former president's influence on the party is declining, even though slowly. I do think there are people that are waking up to the fact that, okay, not only wasn't the election stolen, but we need to quit even pretending that. And so we need to continue to be a force to take the party back and hope we can beat the clock on that. I don't know what the future holds on everything. I know that the Country First movement's gotten a lot of interest, a lot of support, a lot of members. But we're really in a race from truth and falsehood, and I hope truth wins. But we'll see.
And in that vein, I know you've taken trips for what the AP has described as finding unicorns, i.e. regular Americans, Republicans who are anti-Trump. What did you find?
So they're out there. And I mean, if you look at any polls, typically among any Republicans specifically, 25 to 30% of them would be in that category. The problem is in a primary, they're outnumbered 2-1, but that 30% is still a significant group of people. And so I think trying to find folks that are going to run in primaries with a country first message, but a real message of truth is very important. I think getting that message out to people that they have been misled and abused by the former president is important to waking people up. And so, look, they certainly are out there. They want to help. They've joined, for instance, the Country First movement. But I'll tell you, again, we are outnumbered. But my hope is over time that haze or that mislead that's in people's eyes goes away.
And going back to Liz Cheney, I know that in 2019, she called Democrats, quote, the party of anti-Semitism, the party of infanticide, the party of socialism. In 2020, she said now Vice President Kamala Harris, quote, sounds like Karl Marx. And more recently, she said that the American Rescue Plan will, quote, provide stimulus checks for illegal immigrants, criminals, and even terrorists. Many of those statements are inflammatory or inaccurate. Do you believe those statements to be true?
No, I don't. And look, I mean, that's a question for Liz. I think what we're talking about now when we talk about the defense of democracy is not really, is there a difference on whether you should vote for the American Rescue Plan or not? I certainly believe that inflammatory rhetoric, whether it's on our side or the other side, shouldn't be used anymore. Let's be clear, though, it is used all over in politics. That's part of the problem, is people using fear. But really what we're dealing with as a country is the bottom line, defensive democracy. And I think no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, you have to admire Liz's desire to defend democracy. Look, the Cheney reputation has always taken a hit for its stand against authoritarianism all around the globe. That's what obviously she has stood for, strong America for that reason. Well, she's standing against authoritarianism here. And I think at this moment, it's important to note that and join together with people that are in the fight to save this country's democracy.
And at the start, you said, that's a question for Liz Cheney. But given that we know that those stated remarks are false, who do you look to as the truth tellers in your party now?
Well, look, I think Liz is telling the truth on a lot of stuff. I mean, I think she tells the truth. Now, in terms of inflammatory rhetoric on things like that, look, again, that is a problem that a lot of people have. I'm not going to justify it. I'm not going to defend it. It's a reality. And it's something that as a country, voters and donors need to turn away from. But I certainly think she has shown her leadership chops, not just on things like America's role in the world or conservative policies, but most importantly at this moment on defending democracy. So there's a lot of people that are leading in the party. It's just not that many compared to everybody else right now.
And given the divisions that we're seeing within the Republican Party, I wonder if you see a third party of sorts emerging. And would that involve more moderate members of the GOP forming their own branch, or extremists abandoning the GOP to become the quote-unquote Trump party, as some pundits have suggested?
Well, I would love to see the extremists abandon the Republican Party. In terms of the viability of a third party, just historically, it doesn't work, and so that's a recognition why we have to fight within the party. But if you look at the trends over recent years, recent being the last couple decades, Republicans and Democrats used to both have a variety of opinions within their own party. There were pro-life Democrats, pro-choice Democrats, pro-choice Republicans, pro-life Republicans. That is all sorted out, people believing all one thing in general. And so I think that leaves the American people feeling unrepresented, most of which are not on the extremes of either. So I think if there ever is a third party, this is probably around the time where that might take flight. But I also think it's worth fighting to save the Republican Party, because if history is any context, it will be a two-party future, and it will be Democrats and Republicans.
And shifting to the current Republican Party, when it comes to policy, many Republicans have been critical of President Biden's proposals for infrastructure investments and building back the economy, saying it's too expensive. So given that, what do you want to see as a plan to make sure that our economy bounces back?
Yeah, so look, I think it's a couple things. I think it's spending the money where we need to. We spent, I think, pretty generously during COVID, of which Republicans even supported, which we needed to. I'm for an infrastructure bill. I think an infrastructure bill needs to be just infrastructure. We can't go expanding the definition, but we can have real debates over the expanded definition on a different bill. So I would be supportive of a kind of middle ground on infrastructure, because I think it needs to be done. We do have to be concerned, though, with an overheating economy. This is a real issue. But I think in the long term, I'd love to work with the administration, or any administration, to do things like fixing education, to make sure that we're giving people the best opportunity so that kids don't think they have to go to college or they're not going to be successful. There are great opportunities in manufacturing and things along that line. So basically taking our country into the 21st century, and our government with it into the 21st century.
And as you talk about collaboration, and earlier you mentioned inflammatory remarks, I need to mention that some members of the Republican Party have embraced Nazis and white nationalists and fascists. Do you see yourself being able to make some sort of alliance with these members of your party?
No, I don't think you need to make an alliance with somebody that says anything like that you strongly disagree with. The reality is you can't stop anybody from getting elected as or calling themselves a Republican. It's just not a thing the party or I have the power to do. But what you can do is just appeal to people's, bigger, I guess, desires for the country. That's why I think it's still important to cross the aisle and have those conversations. But no, there's no room in my heart to accept people that say extremely racist, inflammatory things. And I think, I can be especially critical of my party. It's the idea of, criticizing the speck in somebody's eye with a plank in your own. But I do think both sides in this case need to really take inventory of how we do politics and call on people's better angels and better judgment.
And you referenced not agreeing, but I wonder, would you push top Republican leaders to denounce white supremacy and conspiracy theories that they are speaking and supporting?
Yeah, 100%. And I voted again for the QAnon resolution, things along that line. I think it is incumbent on leaders to lead. Leadership is not about simply following what you need to. Leadership is about leading people to a better future, and I think rejecting conspiracies and division is the number one thing we ought to be doing as leaders.
And with QAnon, you said that the fight against QAnon was a long-term battle for the soul of the party. I wonder if it's a battle, then what is the opposing force to you?
Well, the opposing force to QAnon is truth tellers, right? And I think QAnon itself as a movement is dying out. There's only so many times you can predict Trump will come back as president until you realize it's a garbage movement. But that will be replaced by some conspiracies. We've already seen it replaced by election trutherism or bamboo ballots in Arizona. And I think the only way to disinfect darkness and lies is with truth. And while it may seem like that is a losing battle at points, I think ultimately the truth will win out. And I think that's what we can do. That's what we have to do, because I think otherwise we're going to look back someday and realize that this country fell apart and it was totally foreseeable.
And I want to end on Afghanistan. I know that you served, and we thank you for your service. What do you make of Biden's plan to pull troops out of that country?
Well, look, I don't like it. I oppose it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm incorrect. My fear is that when we leave Afghanistan with our NATO partners, that government will collapse and we will see a return to pre-2001, where women have no rights, they're abused, they're kept in different rooms, they're used as sex slaves, as well as any other Taliban egregious behavior we've seen. Look, the reality is 2,500 American troops there. We have begun to achieve what we set out to do, which is to have the Afghan government defend itself. The vast majority of casualties in the war in Afghanistan are by the Afghan military. We just need to be there to stiffen their spine. It's a decision I can't make. I oppose the decision, but I certainly hope I'm wrong in this assessment. I just fear I'm not.
Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks to everyone for watching. This has been Know This Live. I'm Zinkley Esamwa.